Welcome to Read Your Comics. Today I'm looking at Hardware #1 from Milestone Comics. Before I get started, I just wanted to say thank you to all the subscribers. If you're new to the channel, please make sure you are liking and subscribing. And I'd also appreciate any comments, good or bad. That definitely helps the algorithm and it helps other comic fans out there find this channel. So today, this is another one of my videos in a series exploring 1993 comics. This was not one of the top sellers, which is kind of unfortunate. This is the actual first Milestone comic. Most people probably just associate Milestone with Static, but Hardware was the launch title. These came out in kind of a glut of books. Hardware actually came out the same month as the Return of Superman issues and Turok #1. Those all came out the same month, and those were the top sellers of the year. This one got pushed way down just for that month. It was the 93rd comic, top selling comic of that month. It did not crack the top 300 for the year. So if you're unfamiliar with Milestone, there's plenty of other good videos out there. Really deep diving into the imprint itself. Created by Dwayne McDuffie, it was meant to add some diversity to comics in general, particularly DC. DC had a lack of diversity problem. It's funny that though this was not actually part of the DC universe. They would eventually do a crossover with DC, with the main DC universe, but for the most part, this is like a removed pocket universe, and it was billed as being very African-American centric. The creators, most of them, not all of them, were African-American, and the characters were going to tend to be African-American. So there, I remember at the time there was that kind of push for that. I didn't get these at the time, probably just because, like I said, they were part of just a glut of different comics. I was really into Image at the time, so I was getting all of those. I was getting a lot of the Valiant books, or getting into them. And then, of course, just my regular, like Spider-Man, Hulk, X-Men, those kind of things that were coming out. I mean, I was a kid. My budget was limited. And even though I was able to work in a comic shop and get some like trade credit by helping out, I should say, I probably had more than a lot of people did. But this line is just something that kind of got lost. And if I was being honest, I would say the DC imprint kind of hurt it to some degree. If this had come out by Image, I probably would have been all over it. But coming out from DC, even though I was getting the Death Return of Superman, I was getting Nightfall. Those were the main two DC books I got. I eventually would get into Green Lantern. But, you know, for the most part, DC was not really my thing at the time. So being under the DC imprint is probably one of the reasons I would have not given this much attention. All of these #1s did come bagged with a card, which also, in my opinion, for brand new titles that you've never seen before, I think having them in a bag for the first issue that you can't pick it up and flip through it to check it out is harmful. So if you can't pick up that first issue and just give it a flip through, brand new characters, brand new concept, I mean, why would I just take a chance on it? They did come with a card. This particular copy that I got did not come already bagged. It was a back issue that I picked up. It did have this backboard that inside it talks about how all of them came with a trading card, which it did not have, but it had this backboard. It is the flimsiest. It's funny that they called it a backboard. I mean, it's barely cardstock. So it's funny that they referred to this as a backboard. But let's dive into the issue. It does have a pretty good cover. It kind of has a little bit of like an indie vibe to it, to me, at least indie of the time. Story starts out and just narrative device. The main character, we're going to introduce him as a child, and he's talking about how he had this parakeet that he kept in the cage, and he would take it out to clean the cage, and it would always try to fly out and escape and head right to the window and like ram into it. And I thought this opening sequence was pretty funny with this bird smacking into the glass. And I mean, that's a brutal thunk. And then when he puts it back in the cage, it's like so sad. It's so sad. But the narrative there is that like the bird thought he was free, but really he wasn't. Fast forward to the future. Here's our main character grown up, and he's got this, I don't want to say it's an Iron Man outfit. It's not, although it is gadgety, right? And the first story is called Angry Black Man, and that's not really completely fair to the story. I don't think that, I could see where that probably in 93 turned off some audiences. So that wasn't really a fair title. Oh, I should have done the credits. Sorry. Let's go back. We have Dwayne McDuffie as the writer. Dennis Cohen is the penciler, or Denny's Cohen, and I'm not really familiar with what else he's done, but I do like the pencils in this. Jimmy Palmiotti was the inker. Noel Giddings is the color artist, and that is, the colors stood out to me in this, and the color process, which I'll get more into that in a few minutes when we hit up kind of like an introduction page. Anyway, this is a pretty good splash page. It looks like he's coming up out of the skylight. And there's some helicopters chasing him and stuff, and all that's pretty good superhero fare. So we started out, I think we're starting out with a good introduction. And this, again, had this not been bagged and boarded and you picked it up to flip through it, you'd have seen this like really solid art. I like this like motion right here, how it flattens out, but it's like definitely a curve. Like he came up real quick and then whoosh, went backwards, almost 90 degree. Zipping around, taking on these helicopters. It's kind of clear, are these military? I don't think they are. I think they're like a private company, like enforcers as it goes along. But you know, in these worlds, these private companies, big conglomerate corporations, they have their own like military strike forces at the ready. Just a little piece of what's going on. Nightfall was starting. This is one of the earlier issues, part 1. For time context of when this came out. So again, pretty good art through here. Pretty good action sequence. You see him using his gadgets here. Some of them, I mean, they're all working, but they kind of like, some of them are one use only. He loses his jetpack. And he's falling, so he gets this like whip out, which he says is like a plasma whip. And you get like, you know, the kind of techie, like the computer talking to him kind of thing. But he doesn't want to like turn the plasma whip on necessarily, so that he can just grab it and use it to like swing himself back up to the helicopter. Right now he's kind of on the escape. He had done something like disrupted some kind of illegal activity, and he's trying to just kind of get away now. And he kills. He pulls these guys out and drops them. Okay, so this company line. So this actually is a good introduction to Milestone in general. It talks about like how it came to be, and you know, thanking the reader for stopping in, which I posted this on my Instagram stories the other day. The opening thing is about like, hey, you're reading this, great. You didn't just buy it and stick it in a bag and board and put it away in a box. We made these comics to be read. I love that. But also in here, he talks about the coloring process, and I thought that I came back to this after I read the issue, and I saw this page, and I was like, I'll come back to that in a minute. And I read and finished reading the issue, and I came back to it, and I thought during it, I was like, man, the colors in this are really different for the time. They're not that like early computer colors that like, you know, Image or Malibu was employing. They're definitely not the flat like Marvel, DC standard of the time colors. I guess the closest comparison would be something close to Valiant. What Valiant was doing. But the palette and stuff is different. They're definitely using some kind of like wash, but he talks about how they found a new way to separate the colors so it could be printed on this newsprint type of paper. And I think it comes out great. I think it really comes out really clear. So we get the main character comes back to his hideout, and this is where we start to get the exposition kind of his origin. As he removes his outfit here, which takes some machine work, it's not just like a black jumpsuit. And then he talks about how he has his own secret lab, or not secret lab, but his own lab to work in and operate, and how that sounds like a good thing. Much like the parakeet that was being taken care of in its cage, it was never really free. It had an appearance of freedom, but wasn't really free. So, we're going to flash back to him as a child. He's obviously a very brilliant young student, wins the science fair, and he catches the attention of this. I want to say he's almost like a Steve Jobs type person, although I don't think that's who was inspiring this in '93. But kind of think of him as that's what he is. He's like a inventor, marketer, entrepreneur, and he spots the brilliance of him. So he starts paying for him to put him through the best schools. He excels, graduates from high school early, gets his degree and a doctorate super early. The guy offers to pay for everything as long as he agrees to come work for him in the end. And he essentially becomes his like top employee. So at one point though, he decides, you know what? I'm the best employee here. I'm the one that's bringing in all the bucks. I'm going to go talk to him about like, can I get some kind of, and he even says he's like almost like a father figure to him. So he figures, you know what? I can go in there and I can ask like, hey, can I get a bigger piece of the pie? Even though you are paying me well and all yada yada, but I'm coming up with these inventions that is making this company billions, and I'm only getting, millions. But in a way, this is almost commentary on the comic book industry, I would say, which was rapidly changing at this time. And it's worth noting, this Milestone imprint was creator owned, even though it was through DC. Dwayne McDuffie and the other creators owned this. They could have left DC like after whatever their licensing contract expired and gone somewhere else. And in that, they got complete creative control. This is the kind of stuff that like Jack Kirby wanted in the 70s to do his New God stuff. He wanted complete creative control. And, he got some, but not, they wouldn't turn over the keys completely. But they did for these Milestone books. Almost. Anyway, so it goes through where basically the dude, flips on him and he's like, this is like a pet dog asking, for more food at the table or something like that. And totally dismisses him, does it in the rudest way, which of course sets him off. And he goes like, I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into his background, finds out he's into like some illegal criminal activities, but also owns the press, owns the police, blah, blah, blah. Can't really go to them. So he sets off to make his own super suit. And this was a neat scene, I thought, because at the beginning of the book, and even the cover, I mean, that looks kind of like his face, just as plain face. It's not quite as dark as here. But on this, it's like he walks through something. He walks through something, and it like even sticks to his face. So like even though his face is like there, it'd probably be hard to identify because of this extra skin he's putting on. Which I don't think it mentioned it, but it has some kind of like a little extra protective ability as well. And then of course he gears up, and it's kind of neat because his gear can change with what he needs it to do, with whatever he's, setting out to go do. He can add extra gear. So, kind of Iron Man-ish. It's got a super awesome looking hover car that he has to take out because his jetpack got destroyed at the beginning of the issue. It's going on to stop another one of the illegal operations of the investor guy. Some brutalness going on right here. Slicing arms off. So you could tell this is definitely not in the vein of like, your average like Superman, Batman comic. I don't believe it was code approved. Let's go back to the beginning again. Oh, it was code approved. So 1993, the code was definitely allowing gruesome dismemberment. I mean, that's pretty gruesome. There's like chunks of blood and stuff flying through there. Anyway, we wrap up the story where he runs into what is more or less a multiple man. And they're coming, you know, they line up and it says to be continued. So I really enjoyed this. This was my first time reading this. I did it for this, you know, exploration of 1993. Milestone's always something I've kind of like wanted to look into, but just never took the time to do it. I've been trying to get some of the other ones. I've not had a lot of luck yet. I know the static one in particular gets a little pricey. So, I mean, I'm just looking for basic reader copies more or less. But I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. And the more I've learned about like what Blood Syndicate is and how it kind of sets off the rest of the universe and what Icon actually was, I'm interested in Milestone now definitely more than I was back then. So I would recommend this if you've never read it. Definitely some breakdown on Blood Syndicate, which was the second title. I don't know how they came out. If they came out a month apart or like for the month, they came out like once a week or something. The 4 titles that launched it. And then eventually they had maybe up to 6 titles. And they all lasted a while. At least 3 or so years. Dwayne McDuffie did have a falling out over with Paul Levitz at one point and left for a while and then eventually returned, which is another interesting story in itself about, you know, some disagreements about covers and stuff. But I did really enjoy this, and that's all I got for it today. As always, read your comics.